welcome back. The Brigden Fair wrapped up this past Thanksgiving weekend, drawing close to 50,000 people over 4 days. That's about a 7,000 person increase compared to last year's attendance numbers. It's hard to believe this event started in 1850 as a simple one-day affair. Joining us today is Nicole Aszalos from the Lambton County Archives. She's here to give us the look at the origins of the fair and the interesting history of the land. Nicole, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, you're back here to tell us some more fun information. I love this stuff. And why don't we start with the origins as we were talking about. So, much smaller back in 1850.
Yes.
You know, it said, you know, that it started at Riley's Tavern, and it was featuring cattle and horses. And Dennis Robinson, who was actually the fair's publicist, was here to talk to us about the fair a couple weeks ago. And he told us that back then it was a school holiday. So that's pretty cool. So there's lots of history there. Why don't we start with what you were able to find in terms of the very first beginnings?
So at the time, when you think of the first beginnings around 1850, the area itself was still very largely forested. So you do have a lot of settlers still coming in and settling the land. So a lot of times each farm would have a small clearing, maybe a log home, but that was really about it. They'd fulfill their settlement duties and that was it. And even when you think about 1850 drainage at that time, the first ditches in the area were dug in 1854, so you can imagine the land would likely be a little bit more wet than
Mud
it is
everywhere.
today.
Let's be real.
Yes, and so it was quite interesting because especially in that early time, you do have for a few years the fair alternating around between the different communities. And then a little bit later in 1871, when the railway came through, you had communities like Courtright and Brigden really flourishing in their population. So now you had 4 communities coming in and essentially taking part in those competitions and showing their horses and cattle and all that type of stuff.
That's really cool. Like, just totally different world to us, eh? I mean, in terms of where we are now. But so for several years then, the fair didn't have a permanent home. And can you talk about, you know, maybe a little bit more how we got to where we are today, which is its permanent home?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, for a while it didn't have a permanent home. There was an early tract of land in 1881 where James Skeoch, John Mackenzie, and John Armstrong had purchased land near Brigden, but then there was some local pressures that caused the fair to end up moving locations. So going into the more permanent location, or the location of which the Fairgrounds is today, in the Moore Agricultural Society initially rented that land. So it was rented by, or from John Battram, who owned the land. He had purchased the property, which he had purchased in 1888, and I believe they began renting in 1889. And over the years, they essentially operated out of there. And in 1915, on April 9th, 1915, for $1,939.50, they were finally able to purchase the 15 acres of land that they were using as the fairgrounds, and basically grow it over the years to what it is today. So they continued acquiring land 1932, 1944, 1975, and 1985.